So my subject this morning is the power to be. And we're going to be talking about the power to do, the power to resist, and the power to be. And I take my title from an article by Swami Vedarupananda in the Voice of India, commenting on a verse from the Narayana Upanishad, where it discusses the different aspects of Shakti, the divine power of the universe. Let's begin with look a little bit about the power to do. Begin at the beginning here with the Atman, your true self, the spirit within you, reflected in the buddhi, that is in the intellect, becomes yourself, the doer, the agent of action, processing all of the input from the senses, and acting to determine what is the good. Once the determinative faculty, that is the intellect, has decided that if the psyche, if you have a well-ordered psyche, then consciousness naturally flows towards the good. Consciousness is attention, and attention is energy. And whatever you put your attention on will be energized and will begin to vibrate. And the things around it will begin to resonate with that vibration. And so that energy goes into your cells of your body, into the tissues, resonates with the organs and the muscles. And as a result, you are activated and move to accomplish what you've determined to be good. Consciousness, in and of itself, this we could call the spirit. And the willpower we could call the spirit in action. We have an aspect of our psyche, it's called volition. Volition just means the power of the soul to initiate action and to persevere with achieving and accomplishing that action. We take it for granted. But let's look at an old legend. Talking about taking it for granted. Let's look here at an old legend of Adi Shankaracharya, who is the founding father of the Advaita, non-dualistic philosophy of Vedanta. He came to the city of Benares. By that time, a master of all the knowledge of the universe at that time. Benares is the center of learning and debate and philosophers and seekers of truth. And there he taught the philosophy of non-dualism. Shankaracharya was focused on the non-dual reality, the ultimate reality that underlies the universe. That means Brahman. But at that time, he was unmindful of the immanent creative power that created this universe, personified as Shiva and Shakti and worshipped in the city of Benares. And by the way, our subject this morning is actually about Shakti and Vishnu. This is a Vaishnava Upanishad, but that doesn't matter. So there he is. So one day, and so he had neglected that whole aspect. He had already had the highest knowledge, that is Brahmajnana, but it was not the fullest knowledge. And so one day, as he finished his bath in the river Ganges, it came up at the Manikarnika Ghat, slowly walking up the stairs. All of the energy of he just collapsed. And he couldn't move his legs. He couldn't move his arms. He could barely speak. He called out quietly, "Someone please help me." But he was a very high caste Brahmin. That means all the people there at the Ghat, they wouldn't even dare to touch him. They moved away. They were shocked to see him lying there. And there as he lay helpless, along that way there came a young girl, and maybe she was half his age. She was like 8 years old. And she came walking up to the bathing ghat. And Shankaracharya cried out, he said, "Oh mother, please help me. I can't move." And the girl came up close to him, and she looked at him and smiled. And then she said, "What's that you say, sir? You don't have the power to move?" And she began to laugh. And as she laughed, the stones of the bathing ghat began to tremble and to shake, and the water of the river began to shake, and the buildings tremble and vibrate. And the whole universe was about to collapse with this ringing sounds of her laughter. And Shankaracharya realized that he was in the presence of what in Benares was worshipped of the Divine Mother. And so he had a change of heart, as a result of which, when he left that city, he had another 16 years to live, traveled the whole of India, preaching the philosophy of non-dualism, but stopping at every temple and at every shrine to worship God in many different forms. So Shankaracharya had a broadening of his scope of his knowledge. A similar thing happened to the non-dualist teacher of Sri Ramakrishna. His name was Tota Puri. Now, Tota Puri was a staunch non-dualist. He was only interested in the absolute. He didn't really, he was unmindful of the creative power of this world. And he came to Dakshineshwar, and there lived Sri Ramakrishna, the greatest devotee of the Divine Mother, worshipping in the Kali temple. And he would come out of the temple, and he would be clapping his hands, singing the name and glories of the Divine Mother. And Tota Puri would look at him and he'd say, "What are you making, chapatis?" Holding his hands like this. Well, Tota Puri also, he had an awakening of a spiritual consciousness, because he fell at one point. He contracted a terrible affliction. a dysentery, which is wrings your whole body like a wet towel, twisting your whole body. And his usual routine was just to go, and he'd sit in there in the Panchavati. He would withdraw his mind, he would plunge his mind into samadhi. In that way he'd spend the whole night and parts of the day. But now he found that he couldn't do that. That as he began to meditate, he tried and tried to meditate, but his mind was dragged down to the level of the body. And so at one point he thought, well, I'm a non-dualist. I've realized I'm not the body. Why should I put up with this? And so he decided, I'm going to end it all. Now the Dakshineshwar Kali temple is right on the bank of the river Ganges. At that point, the river is maybe 1/2 of a mile wide. And ocean steamers used to ply that river up and down. It's very deep. Totapuri walked out there, and he, intending to end it all, in the meditative state of mind, he placed one foot in the water and another foot, and like this, with great determination, he walked and he walked. And then after a little while, he opened his eyes and he saw he was in the middle of the river. But he was only ankle deep. And then he realized, what is this? I don't have the power to do what I intended to do. And he realized that there's another power, Mother Nature, the Divine Mother. And so he returned, and so the story goes, he came to the Kali temple, made pranams there, and when he left Dakshineshwar, he was a wiser man. Now, we don't have the problem that Shankaracharya had, where the power was kind of cut off at the source. We don't have that problem because, as Sri Ramakrishna says, the grace of God is always blowing. All we have to do is raise our sails. So if we make an effort, we can accomplish things. We can do things. As all successful people know very well, but we take it for granted. We think it's all on our own human power, whereas it's a working here of the divine power. And this is why Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, say, look around you. You see people who have achieved marvelous, amazing things. And they're celebrities, they're famous, they're like movie stars, twinkling and shining in the sky. And the verse says there, look at all of those lights that you see around us. All of them, as Sri Krishna speaking there as a divine being. He said, all of these, recognize, these are all reflections of my own power. They're reflections of the divine energy in the universe. And therefore, we salute all successful people who have achieved great things in the world. So let's look here. Now we're going from the lower to the higher. We're going to the expressions of Shakti. Tamas, Rajas, Sattvic, in an evolution. Let's look at the power to resist. Well, we know very well as spiritual aspirants that that's something that, we're interested in that, because although we know very well, we've determined what we know what is good, and yet we have the power to do, but sometimes we're lacking in the power to resist that which is necessary to complete our action. This is the power of resistance. We read there in the Katha Upanishad, opens with a story about Nachiketas a young Brahmin boy. And his father, Ujjayi Shravas, he was going to do a great sacrifice to the gods. And that sacrifice, very few people could do it because it required that you take the most dearest things, your most dear and near and dear to your heart, your material possessions, everything is then brought together and is offered in the sacrificial fire to the gods. Now, most important material possession that they had at that time was cows. That was like their money. And so the father had assembled he had a big herds of cattle, but he assembled all those cows that were the most weak and barren. And Nachiketas, his son, seeing that, and being a great devotee of truth, he questioned his father, saying, "Father, what are you doing? I thought you're supposed to give all the most best things to God. You have given these cows. To whom will you give me? I'm also dear to you." And the father, looking at him, a little vexed, because the son had dared to question the authority of the father. So with a little vexation, he said, "Who will I give you to? I'll give you to death." In other words, you go to the lower place. And the boy thought, okay, my father's telling me to go down into the nether worlds, into the hell regions. And so he set off. And he went down into the hell worlds, in hell realms. He came to the house there of Yama, the Lord of Death. But Death was not at home at that time. 3 days passed. Finally, he returned, and seeing there at his front gate, there was a Brahmin boy who'd been waiting there without food or drink for 3 days. Oh, now he is very worried. This is a great sin for a householder. An honored guest has come. You've given him nothing. He says, "Revered sir, please forgive me for this. For this waiting, these three, I'm going to give you 3 boons. Ask whatever you want." And the boy said, "Well, okay. My first boon is that when I return to earth, that my father will no longer be angry with me." His second boon was, "Teach me the secrets of the Vedic, this fire sacrifice, which enable my family to go to the heavenly worlds." Granted, said Yama, "no problem." The third boon is, "Teach me about the Atman, about my true self, the secret of the Upanishads." And Yama at that, he says, "Oh no, son, I can't do that. Don't ask for that question. Don't ask that question. Don't worry about that. I'll give you power over all the 3 worlds. I'm going to give you horses and chariots and dancing girls. You can just enjoy your whole life." And the boy looked at him and he says, "No." He said, "Yours be the horses, and yours the dancing song. As for me, I think I'll just take an answer to my boon." And so the rest of the Katha Upanishad is Lord Yama explaining the nature of the Atman. And so Nachiketas, he had the power of resistance to resist those temptations. We read in the lives of all the saints. When they're on the quest, that's part of the soul quest narrative, that they have to face distractions and temptations that lead them away from the truth. And now let me tell you another story about temptation. There was a sage in ancient times. He was a famous, and a lot of legends are written about this sage, Vishwamitra. And one of the part of the story is this: is that he was a king at one time, but he saw the transience, the ephemeral nature of this world, and so he just gave up his kingdom. He wanted to become a Rajarshi and a Brahmarshi. The word Rishi there just means a great sage. And there are different grades of these sages. So he wanted to become a sage. And so he left the world, went deep into the forest, and there he just began to live alone, under a tree, eating fruits, nuts. Time passed. Years passed. Year after year. 500 years passed. He was doing tapas. That is, every day he would spend in meditation and worship. 600 years passed. Almost 1,000 years passed. And he had accumulated great power. In fact, he had accumulated so much power that the gods in heaven were now becoming worried, because maybe he would just create a whole new heaven. Maybe he would override their dominion. And so they decided this: what can we do? Well, yes. So they sent to visit him a young, a heavenly nymph. They're called apsaras. She's the most beautiful woman in the world. And so she was dancer and singer. So they sent Menaka down to the earth world. And there on her shoulder was perched a parrot. The parrot kind of was an embodiment of the god of love, a cuckoo. And Vishwamitra meditating there, he heard the sound of the tinkling of her anklets. He opened his eyes. Oh, what did he see? And he heard the beautiful music. Oh, he just fell in love. Well, as the story goes, they were married. And they had a daughter. And but time passed. But then Vishwamitra, it began to realize and dawn on him, what about his old aspiration to become the greatest sage? All this now, he was caught up in the world. And so a great spirit of renunciation came upon him. He just left her. He left his wife, left his child, returned to the forest. Menaka didn't care. She was a goddess. She just disappeared into thin air. She went back to heaven. And the little girl who was abandoned, her name was Shakuntala. She was later found in the forest and was married and became the mother of Bharata. That means the father of the whole India. But meanwhile, Vishwamitra, he had left. He went deeper into the forest this time with a great vow. And he just vowed to live. He's just going to live on air. He's just going to drink water, eat leaves. And like this time passed, year after year, he did tremendous tapas, meditating and praying and doing worship all day long. His power gradually increased and increased until he was threatening the power again of the gods. And Indra and the gods, they decided it was time to send another temptation. Well, they sent another apsara. Her name was Ramba. And Ramba came down, and Vishwamitra was meditating. He heard her coming, he heard the anklets, and he heard her song. He opened his eyes, and what did he saw? The same thing again. He remembered what had happened. He was so vexed, he was so angry that he cursed her. Cursed her just to become a stone. And so she became stone. But as a result of which, that curse, he lost all of his power. And he had to go back to square one again. But he still had that desire to become a great sage. And so again, with renewed resolve, he returned to the forest. Went deeper and deeper into the forest and the foothills of the Himalayas. And there, just living on air and water and just meditating day and night, he did tapas. And gradually, as he did more and more tapas, his energy, power increased. Again, the gods sent Ramba and Talotama and a whole chorus of dancers. And this time when he heard that, Vishwamitra opened his eyes and he smiled. And he said, "Oh, welcome. Yes, dance and sing. Enjoy yourselves. As for me, I will meditate on the Atman." And so he withdrew his mind again into meditation. He had been successful. He had acquired the power to resist. And so that's kind of our thinking about different powers. We're talking this morning about power. And how it defines different expressions in our life. That we need that power to do, and we need the power to resist temptations and distractions. How can we meditate without that divine grace that would enable us? And so now let's look at the third kind of, we're talking here about the power to do, the power to resist, and the power to be. Now, that is kind of, when we say the power to be, it sounds like, well, the idea behind it here, the philosophy behind it is that the divine manifests itself. That the two aspects here, there's the active, there's the dynamic aspect, which creates this whole world, the immanent power of God of this world. And then there's the static aspect, that which is just pure being. So we have the actual world of our experience, and all of the matter and energy in the world, and then we have that power subsides, it becomes dormant, it becomes potential, and all that exists is the immovable being. And so we may say, okay, being. What do you mean by the power to be? Well, because it seems like that expression needs something more to it to complete it. Otherwise, to be what? And we could say, well, in Vedanta, we would explain it by saying, well, the power to be who you really are. The power to be the power to be the witness of whatever happens. So those two powers, Sri Ramakrishna puts it concretely. He says it's just as a snake and a wriggling motion. Just imagine now that we understood the wriggling snake. But now when the snake stops moving, what happens? Well, it's still the same snake. It's now there's no movement. That is it. Now we're talking about the power to be. The power just to be the witness of whatever happens. The witness does not participate. It's just the knower, the awareness. You remember how in the life of Swami Brahmananda, he went in the course of his early wandering years, he went up into the Himalayas and the foothills to a place called Uttar Kashi. And there at the beginning of the cold winter season coming on, he just had a chadar, dhoti. And there he'd meditate under a tree, absorbed his mind within. And one day as he sat there meditating, a traveler came by that way, and he was a devotee, and he was a merchant. And he looked there and he saw that Swami under the tree. It was so cold. And he thought, I'm going to give him a shawl. So he had an expensive shawl in his cart. We took out. He went over and he offered it there, laid it down before the Swami, made his pranam, and then went off on his way. Swami Brahmananda remaining seated, in meditation, his eyes just half open, barely aware of what's happening. Time passed, and another traveler came by that way. Well, he wasn't such a devotee. In fact, he was a thief. And when he saw that beautiful shawl, he thought, that monk doesn't need a shawl. I think I'll take it. So he just went over. He took it, and he went on his merry way. And Swami Brahmananda just sat there, observing, as we would say, easy come, easy go. He's detached. That he had the power just to be the observer, free from likes and dislikes and the turmoil of mind that leads to suffering. These are kind of stories that are popular in the tradition of Zen Buddhism. Once a young disciple, he came to the monastery, and he was doing his spiritual practices, but he had difficulty. He would try to meditate, but it was too hot, he couldn't meditate. Then weather would change, it'd be too cold, and he couldn't meditate. So he came to the guru and he says, "Sir," he says, "I'm sorry, when it's hot, I can't meditate. It's cold, I can't. What can I do?" And the guru said, "Well, why don't you go to a place where there is neither hot nor cold?" And he thought, yeah, where would that be? He thought, "Sir," he said, "Well, I don't know, where would that be?" And the guru looked at him and said, "Well, when it's hot, be hot. When it's cold, be cold." That's a typical Zen story. You question about what? But see, this is the idea. The idea is that the Buddha mind. What is the Buddha mind? It's like that. It's like a mirror. The teaching is that you hold your mind like a mirror. A mirror does not grasp. It does not refuse. It accepts, but it does not keep. It doesn't cling to anything. It just reflects reality as it is. And reality comes and goes, and the mirror remains the same. So similarly, that's the ideal of the Buddhist practitioner. And like Bodhidharma, the founder of Chan Buddhism, that's just Zen, in China, he's the one who brought this idea of meditation practice to China. He came from Ceylon, came there across the border, found himself near what today is called the Shaolin Temple. He found a cave, and he thought, yeah, this is a good place for me. He went in the cave, and he sat down facing a wall. And there he remained for 9 years. He didn't do anything. He was just sitting facing a wall. A question may arise in your mind, what was he doing? How can we explain it? That's our subject this morning. The power to be. Let's look at, try to explain what's happening. Let's talk here about being. Now we're going to get a little philosophical. Let's talk, what is being? It's the kind of question I would ask your neighbor maybe. But being is, well, that just means existence. That just means, as the Greek philosopher Parmenides said, whatever is. Whatever is not is not. So you don't have to worry about the things that are not, they don't exist. And everything that is, that is, means reality. That means everything that exists. And that would be being. It's kind of, well, it's a universal predicate. It means, in other words, it doesn't pick out anything for us because everything that we can think of exists. So it doesn't really help us to define is what. Our question here is more a substantive question. What is the substantial definition of being? And we would say, well, if we were going to analyze it, in other words, what is it that everything in the universe has in common? Well, it's being. It's existence. That is, we can do a primal reduction basis. Everything can be reduced to that basic universal concept of being. In Sanskrit, this is called sat. That means there is being. That's existence. That's what we're looking at. What is that? Well, that's the fundamental thing in the universe. That means you can't reduce it any further. That means, what does that mean? That means that it's true, that it's real. That's what real in Vedanta means, that it never changes. That it can never be contradicted. It can never be sublated. That's what's real. That's the fundamental thing. That's the only thing that's real. So it's reality. We're talking about what is reality. What is truth? The reality is the truth. The reality that is the substratum never changes. And therefore it's the one thing that's always true to its being. That is its truth. Truth with a capital T. Vedanta teaches us that there is an ultimate truth. There's a ground of being. It doesn't just go on forever, progressive, on and on. No. You come to a rock bottom. There's a rock bottom. That's being. That's existence. That's the truth. That's reality. You can say, well, yeah, I've studied physics. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about matter. Matter, that's what we'd call it. And the Vedantic philosophers, they have no problem with that formulation. Okay, it's matter. But what is matter? Matter is, in the old Sanskrit texts, in the Sankhya philosophy, what we call matter, that is the primordial mass, the substance, the ultimate essence of all things, is called akasha. That is, the Sankhya philosophers made it easy for us and boiled everything down to two things. And that is matter and energy. I mean, in their analysis of the world, there's matter and there's energy. And what is matter? Well, it's that which is moved by the energy. That's the stuff that's moved by energy. What is energy? Well, that's the stuff that moves the matter. So that's as far as our conceptual analysis can go. And so everything is made of akasha. But what is akasha? Akasha just means the sky. It means space. And when we think of space, of course, we think, well, you mean space is just emptiness. There's just nothing. There's just a void. This is not the idea of Vedanta. It's not everything is just a void, because space is actually a particle. That is, it is a substance. There is no emptiness in the world. The world is completely full. It's jam-packed full of being. It's like a solid block of being. There's no emptiness between the particles. There's no nothingness. Whatever is, is. Whatever is not, is not. And so that is the being. You say, well, what about me? It doesn't sound right that the substance here is matter. Well, we call it matter because we are identified with our bodies and minds, senses. We look out in the world, we call it matter. But if we were to elevate our minds, change our psyche, saints and sages would tell us, well, no, it's not matter, it's mind. We would see it as mind. They would call it mind. When you go further on, you can call it spirit. It's the same thing. In a lower state, we call it matter. In a higher state, we call it spirit. So everything is made of the spirit. And so being is spirit. So we're trying to define what is being. Now we still have further to go because being here, the Vedanta teaches us that there's an equation of equivalence between being and consciousness. Consciousness, that is, that's just our own consciousness is what? It's just, well, we look at ourselves, we have a body, we have a mind, and we have, certainly we have a nature, we have an essence. When we're doing self-analysis of anything, of ourselves, we have an essence, and the essence is what? An essence is just a distilled spirit. That's all. We have a spirit. That spirit is our consciousness. And the teaching of Vedanta, it makes a very bold statement, and that is that the consciousness is ourself. That means it's not that you have consciousness, that you have a spirit, that you have a soul, but that you are the soul, and that the soul is the spirit, and that you are the spirit, and that you are the consciousness, that you have, as it were, a body, you're embodied, you're an embodied self, but that's not your essence of your being. True nature is pure consciousness. That's being. You can think of consciousness as like light. And light we see, that's how we know everything in the world. We think we see because of the sunlight or because of the light of an electric lamp. We go to sleep, all those lights are now turned off, but we can see with an inner light. Deep sleep, all those inner lights disappear. And still we're conscious, we're still aware, we still know that we have being. And so this is the source. This is our inner light. This is the divinity within us, which is the source of all of our awareness and our knowing. See, we're talking here about going back to the foundation of our being and identifying, changing our identity. It's shifting our identity. Now we're identified with a body and mind. Okay, that's natural. But we can raise our minds and change our perspective so that we identify with the higher, deeper levels of our spirit, ourself, our mind, and our spirit. And the ideal of Vedanta is to become the spirit, to be the Spirit. Well, you can't become the Spirit, because it is that transcends becoming. Becoming is all about the power to do and the power to resist. Now we're talking about being. There's no becoming. It's just being who you really are. And so this being is consciousness. And this being and consciousness are infinite. This is the strong claim of the Vedanta philosophy. That being is infinite. That consciousness is infinite. See, everybody in the universe admits that there's consciousness. That's nothing new. But that you are consciousness, that's a stronger statement. That's a stronger claim. And that this consciousness is infinite, that's another stronger claim. And because this consciousness is infinite, therefore it is defined as one only without a second. And because it contains everything within itself, everything is contained within being and consciousness, and therefore sometimes it's defined as ananda or bliss. Bliss maybe gives you the wrong idea because it's not a sweet little emotion. It's really, maybe we could define it as peace, as infinite peace, as infinite stillness and silence. That's what Ananda is. And so the idea is that is our self, that is our nature. And now we can begin to understand Bodhidharma, sitting there looking at a wall. He's not looking at a wall. He's abiding in his true nature. He's abiding in that infinite awareness of his own spirit. He's doing what all of us are doing every day, struggling to be who we really are, only he's realized it. And so he can remain seated. This is why we see the greatest manifestation of the power to be is to meditate. And we can talk about the spirit in many different aspects of our life. But maybe the greatest expression is when we see that this is why in all the gardens of all the countries of the world, you'll find a statue there of Lord Buddha seated there. Why is that? That's because it represents. Why is it that all the saints and sages that we read about, if they become our chosen ideal, we picture them in the form of meditation pose. Why? Because that's the essence of their being. They're abiding in the spirit. When we sit for meditation, when we withdraw our mind, we focus our mind on the divine light within us and the truth within us, then we are coming close to ascending into that realm of the spirit to achieve our goal, which is the power to be. Okay. Swami, do we have some announcements? No? Otherwise I'll just give a chant. That's all right. We'll conclude here with a chant and then he can give them.